it's very difficult to read the label on the jar when you're inside the jar. What we provide when we're working with clients, as much as anything, is that outside objective perspective. From the inside, it's really easy to focus on some elements of what makes you great without really understanding what makes you different, what makes you unique. It can be really hard to see when you're, kind of inside the organization.
Welcome. This is the Intangible brand. It's where we uncover the connections between employee experience and client experience and the hidden forces that make brands stick. I'm Carl Winstead, Chief Experience Officer at Client Design, and today I get the honor of turning my mic on my co-host, Jerry Gennaria. Now, Jerry is president of TOKY, a brand consultancy that's helped organizations across the country discover and articulate what makes them different and what makes them matter. He's a strategist, a speaker, and as I've learned firsthand, someone who's always pushing for clarity, meaning, and momentum. So, Jerry, welcome to your own show.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the other side. Beautiful opening. I appreciate those kind words. So, yeah, let's jump in and get started.
All right. So, you know what? Maybe we'll start at the start. How about that?
Sounds good.
The world of branding and strategy, it's a big place. So I'm just kind of curious, like what pulled you into this world in the first place?
It's interesting. Last time we talked a little bit about your journey and that pivotal moment when you were young, walking through the lobby of that hotel in Atlanta. I didn't have exactly the same kind of moment, but my early career, my early childhood, had two things in it that I think ultimately kind of drew me to branding, to design. One was computers, and the other was art. I was constantly trying new art forms. I distinctly remember. I grew up haunting the library, and I would go because I'm endlessly curious about all kinds of different things. And one of the things that I stumbled across, and I didn't grow up in Missouri where I live now. I grew up in South Carolina and then in Kentucky. And this is during that time in middle school in Kentucky. I come across this book in the library that was all about wood carving, specifically in a very Ozark style, which if you're familiar with the Ozarks, there's a very interesting and cool, almost caricature kind of style that Ozark wood carving of figures takes. And I thought I was going to be a wood carver. And so
really,
I had a paper route, and I bought the tools, and I bought wood, and then I discovered I am not a wood carver. So I tried all kinds of different art forms. My mom still has some of my early drawings in her house, that was something I always wanted to pursue, but I don't think I was quite good enough as a fine artist to make it as a career. But the other thing that was in my life from a very early age was computers. My dad had a background in electronics. He was fascinated by the early days of personal computers. We had some early Atari computers when everybody else was playing Atari video games. We were actually sitting down and programming on a computer. And so I didn't realize that there was an intersection between these two things until much later. I was married, I was working, and I ended up working for a small printing company on the management side, but they had a small collection of Macintosh computers, which I hadn't grown up with those. They were a little more expensive than we could manage. But I discovered the design tools that were available and started teaching myself those, which led one step to another to a career first as a graphic designer and then ultimately as a strategist. That evolution really took place because of the digital world. So as I'm beginning my career as a designer, the web is really starting to take off. It's the early days of HTML. I taught myself a little bit of HTML, and ultimately got the opportunity through one of my, early jobs to build a team that was focused on web design and development. And there's a lot of strategy and thinking that has to go into the planning of those. And that was really the first opportunity that I had to think about sort of the structure of a brand and how it was going to be manifest in something that people are going to experience in dynamic kinds of ways. I'd been, creating static materials for a long time that were
Hmm.
based on what that physical brand was, but now brand had to, really influence something that was going to be an experience for people. And that, I think, was the beginning of the journey to my current understanding of what is a brand and the ways that, it's an experience rather than just these artifacts that we often think of with a logo or
Yeah.
colors or what have you.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point because I do think, um, and I think you've actually taught me a lot of that too, of just how far brand is. We tend to think a lot of times it's the mark, right? It's the color, it's the logo, and that. But you're right. Brand is so much more than that. And it's really interesting that how your path was. I mean, there's so much self taught and self discovery in that pathway. Definitely think that as a wood carver versus what you're doing now, I think you certainly have made a really really good choice there.
If you
So
saw some of my early work, yes, you would be confirmed in that opinion.
Well, speaking of your work, the branding work that you've done, you have led a lot of different things. I mean, you've led architecture firms, you've led universities, you've led branding work for nonprofits, manufacturers. You name it. There's such a wide list of things that you have touched. And I'm just curious when you certainly look across those very range of things with architecture and nonprofits. Well, of course, those actually are the same thing. Actually, they are nonprofits. But you look at those and say, I'm curious, like, what do you see as a common thread across all those industries? Because there's a lot. There's a lot there.
Right. Yeah. Um, so I'm going to actually borrow something that you said last time, and that's people. At the end of the day, the brand is the experience that, clients, customers, the employees have. And it's not necessarily about, like you said, the colors, the mark, all of those. Those are expressions of the brand. Those are markers of the brand. They're the way that we identify one from another. But it's really the experience that someone has. If you go all the way back to the beginning of branding, literal branding, you're out on the range. You have a lot of different cows. You've got the physical brand that's been put on them, and that brand, that mark, begins to transcend the identification of one ranch's cows from another, and it begins to be a representation of the ranch itself. And you begin to think about the experience of working there, the experience of the land, the experience of the people that are there. And that's what becomes associated with that mark that at one point was really just a way to identify one cow from another. Now it's
Hmm.
become something that allows you to identify one business from another. Um, as a designer, we care a lot about what those marks look like, how those colors work together, and we are judging you based on those. But the public isn't necessarily judging you based on that. They're judging you based on the experience. So I think that common thread is that in almost every situation that I'm involved in, while we may be working on the physical manifestations, whether it's words or it's images, what the organization really cares about is what are we communicating? What they should be
Hmm.
caring about is what is the experience that these people are having with our organization.
Yeah. Well, I know when you worked with Klein, when you worked with us started 3 years ago, that's one of the things that we talked about. Is like, what is it you think people are feeling? What do you want people to feel? We thought
Mhm.
we knew what we want them to feel when they're in one of the buildings we designed, but it's like, well, what do we want the experience of working with us to feel like? And we talked a lot about that, which again kind of comes back to that thought that it's more than just that visual mark. When you think about one of the ideas behind this podcast itself, was in fact that brand is more than visuals or messaging. It's something that you feel.
Right.
Um, so where did that belief come from for you?
Yeah, I think it's come from the experiences that I've had with brands and this kind of realization that how I'm measuring whether or not I want to do business with an organization is based on something, as we put in the title, intangible.
Mhm,
And it's not entirely intangible, I guess. It's it's about the interactions that you're having. Um, we talked a little bit about Disney last time, and the experience that you have when you go to a Disney park is very, very carefully crafted, and it's not
mhm,
about what it looks like. Although there are parts of it that are, but they're in very almost invisible sorts of ways. The care that they take in hiding the things that are not supposed to be part of the experience. Um, the way that they talk about they have a concept of good show and bad show because they think of everything in terms of a performance. Staff are called cast members, and all of that is reflective of this intangible experience that you're having. So as I have observed the organizations that we work with, but more importantly the organizations that we just engage with day in and day out, those kinds of intangible things is really what has resonated with me, and I think part of it is also observing people and how the kinds of experiences that they have, those best in class experiences, whether it's Disney or the Four Seasons or
mhm,
something like that, begins to change their expectations about every experience that they have. Now, when they go to the bank, they have an expectation of what that experience is. And so as I see organizations that aren't keeping up, that aren't delivering the kind of experience that their customers are getting other places, or
mhm,
the things that we experience on our devices. So I mentioned earlier that part of the early part of my career was in web design and development, and that is very closely related to app design and development. I've done a little bit of that as well, and I find myself looking at the kinds of experiences that you have online or with an app and thinking about how does that reflect on the organization. There's very specific decisions that somebody made, or a lack of decisions that they made, by taking the easiest route, the path of least resistance, and yeah, it works, right? I can get the job done,
yeah,
but is it an experience that I want to repeat? Right. And it could be something as simple as, take your bank. So, if you get checks and you need to deposit those checks, the old school way of doing that is to fill out a deposit slip, go down to the bank, maybe go into the counter or go through the drive-through. I loved going to the drive-through when I was a kid because, well, there's two things. One is lollipops, and
right,
the second was just the fascination with the engineering of those vacuum tubes. Like, how does that work?
right, yeah,
Um, but today you don't do that. We don't, for all the proliferation of bank branches that it seems like there is, at least in St. Louis, we don't go to the bank all that often anymore because
mhm,
we do almost all of it online. And one of the coolest innovations, if you get a check, and I do some of the treasury work at our church, so I get some of these checks and I need to deposit them. I can do it entirely on my phone, right? I can take a
mhm,
picture of that check and I can fill out a couple of things, and I can submit that check, and it's deposited, and I've saved myself that trip, and that's great. But what's interesting is I've now used the apps for multiple different banks to be able to submit a check for deposit. And while it works in every single case, I can get the job done. The experience is different in every
mhm,
case. And sometimes it's just the littlest, smallest thing. Like, take, for example, an app that when I go to make the deposit, it shows a list of all my accounts and it asks me to select which account I'm depositing into. Great. That is exactly what it's supposed to do. Except with this particular bank, I only have one account, but it still makes me select that one account because they didn't think that just that little bit of extra thought to make it as frictionless and seamless as possible, that, oh, he only has one account. Of course, he wants to deposit the check into the only
Right.
account that he has. Is it a
Mhm.
big deal that I have to tap that extra time? No, of course not. Am I being a little first world in my thinking about that? Maybe. But it's the level of thinking that you bring to creating an experience, whether it's
Yeah.
sitting across the table from somebody, it's the little things like, if it's complicated to get to your office, when you invite somebody for a meeting, do you send them a map? Do you send them something that helps them
Yeah.
figure out where they're supposed to park? Do you have those things kind of taken care of for them ahead of time? Reducing that friction to create a better experience.
Yeah.
And at some point,
And
we'll have to talk about sometimes you actually need to add friction to create a better experience, but that's a conversation for another
yeah.
time.
Well, and don't you think, I mean, I think you're saying the answer is probably yes, but don't you think that there's a heightened awareness of experiences now? I mean, like, do you think that all of us are like we're more aware and we're paying attention and there are more important than maybe they used to be to us?
Absolutely. In fact, I think there's this really fascinating thing where certain kinds of experiences are becoming more mundane, more casual. Airline travel
Mhm.
is a great example, right? When we were little, flying on an airplane was a big deal. People got dressed up. It was a different experience. Today, flying feels a lot like taking a Greyhound that has wings. And it's just a different experience. But you contrast that with the level of expectation that people have about experiences, and you can see that level of frustration sometimes with people when they're traveling. They
Yeah.
expect it to be a far more seamless experience than it is. And again, you can blame Disney and other organizations that do a really good job of this, but they've created this expectation. And so part of the challenge, I think, for businesses is, how do I balance creating a great experience for our clients, for our employees, with the realities of the cost and the time that's involved in doing that? Disney
Yeah.
charges a premium to go to their parks. Um, and therefore, they are able to invest that premium into creating a premium worthy experience. The Four
Right.
Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, they do the same thing. High-end restaurants do the same thing. So the challenge that we have as consumers is we take those expectations down to the corner drugstore,
Yeah.
to McDonald's, to all of these more mundane kinds of experiences. So for those businesses, how do you elevate? How do you find ways to create, an amazing
Right.
experience? Because that's what your brand is.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and that you're kinda leading into kind of, why does Disney do the way they do it? And I know kind of in looking at how you've worked and how you're focusing on helping organizations articulate, one things that you talk about is the why and why it matters. I know
Mhm.
when we first met, I had just finished my book Why with Simon Sinek, and I was all into that. In fact, before you came on board, I tried to do a homegrown exercise with us, like let's talk about our why. Thank goodness that you came along and you kind of fixed it and got it right. So that's a good thing though, but why do you think it's so hard for some firms to do that? To sort of figure out what their why is, why they did, and how to, I guess, how to figure out the differences and what they're aiming for, right?
Yeah. I think there's two reasons. The first is it's very difficult to read the label on the jar when you're inside the jar.
Hmm,
What
good
we
point.
provide when we're working with clients, as much as anything, is that outside objective perspective. from the inside, it's really easy to focus on some elements of what makes you great without really
Mhm.
understanding what makes you different, what makes you unique. It can be really hard to see when you're, kind of inside the organization. Um, I think the other reason is, and all due respect to Simon Sinek, and I think his books and his talks are fantastic. I don't know that every company has the kind of, save the world purpose or
Mhm.
why in them. That's not why they started the business. And I think architecture, engineering firms, a lot of professional service firms are started by individuals who were working for somebody else and decided, man, I can do this for myself and maybe make more money or maybe do it the way that I want to do it, not have to be beholden to the man, so to speak.
Mhm.
And they're not necessarily going out on their own to do that work because they have, some significant impact that they want to make on the world. So I think for a lot of firms, um, they get challenged thinking that their why needs to be something that is incredibly lofty or very,
Mhm.
very philanthropic or giving back or what have you. And so we end up, particularly in the AEC world, with a lot of purpose statements that feel a little disconnected from what people are doing day to day. We're here to,
Yep.
change the way people experience the
Mhm.
world. And yes, but I think sometimes that why can be a little bit more, close to the ground, a little bit more close to the work that you're doing. I think about what Klein does working in multifamily, and the experiences that you're creating are not about changing the world. They're about changing the lives of individual tenants. They're about changing the businesses of the developers that you work with. That's different, right? I think it's as powerful a why as someone that's, trying to make the planet safer, cleaner, better through the work that they're doing,
Yeah.
because it really gets down to something that's meaningful at an individual level.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you did with us when you took us on our sort of exploration journey, was that what is it you really do and what is it you do well and kind of finding what that distinguishing point is that does make you different and unique from all the other service providers who are out there. And right, we all have sort of a unique point of view. And I think you were very good at helping us sort of understand that and discover that. So
Right.
so yeah. So, so let's think just for a minute. We've talked about the things that have led to this point, but we're here today on your show, the Intangible brand. So can we talk just a minute about that? Because I'm really you've had a real drive for why you wanted to launch this and what it means to you and why now.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two reasons for that as well. So, the first is it's a topic that I'm passionate about.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for businesses to really think about the experience that they're creating with their brand and to think about the intangible aspects of it, to think about how what they're doing with their employees connects with what's happening with their clients. And if I can get more businesses to think about that, I will consider that to be a win. But on a more personal note, this is really a learning experience. One of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast as an interview format is it's a great excuse to bring people that I think are interesting, who are doing interesting things, who
Hmm.
have unique perspectives, and just learn from them and be able to share that with a wider audience. I think there's a lot of people doing really good work in ways that I don't know that we would immediately associate with brand or branding, but absolutely are associated with, the experiences that people have. Um,
Hmm.
we're going to get a chance to talk to some really interesting people. Um, there's someone, there's someone that I want to talk to a lot. based out of Kansas City, Tate Fisher, and we'll have him on later this. We'll interview him later this month. I'm not sure when that episode will air, but they do service design, and I think that that is such a fascinating aspect of of branding. The experience that you have in a service business, in a more transactional service business, whether that's a restaurant or going to buy a cell phone, there's a lot of thought that has to be given, should be given to that physical experience and tying that back to brand. I mean, it's not that people call us on the phone anymore, but when you answer the phone or when you answer an email or a text, every one of
Mhm.
those interactions is relevant to creating that experience. So I want to talk to people like Tate and others that have interesting perspectives and can really just bring us, some honest advice and stories and something practical that I could take away, that you could take away, and that hopefully our audience can take away.
Okay. So that's a great thing. So I mean, like you say, it's a really wide variety of people and topics and whatnot. And so, probably imagine that there'll be a range of audience folks that are that are paying attention to this episodes or this podcast. What is it you're hoping that we'll walk away with after we listen to an episode?
Yeah. I'm hoping that there's an inspiration to do something new and different, and something practical to help you do something new and different. That's the things that I find most valuable in the podcasts that I listen to. One, I walk
Mhm.
away feeling inspired, energized to go off and do something new, or just think about something in a different way. And then also having enough practical advice that I can, put that, into action, do something with it.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, so here's a question that you gave me, and so I'd love to kind of throw it back your direction and ask the same one. So, what's a belief that's really guiding your work right now?
Yeah. So I think in the professional service space that firms don't really understand what truly differentiates them. And we're spending a lot of time at Toki thinking about how do you create differentiation? So often in
Mhm.
professional services, we talk about our people making the difference. And it's true, right? It absolutely is true. But there's
Yeah.
something bigger, deeper than that. And how do we figure out what the truth is about an organization that impacts that brand? So that idea that we have not really cracked the nut on differentiation for so many businesses, and that they're not really thinking about things beyond sort of the surface level, has been driving a lot
Yeah.
of what we've been doing lately. That, and just the idea that those experiences that we've been talking about are driven ultimately by the beliefs and values that the company holds and the team members hold. And when we create strong alignment there, when we really understand what those are, when we can go from just having a value hanging on the wall and we can turn that into, real actionable behaviors, that's when we're able to create that experience that creates the intangible aspects of a brand.
Mhm. Well, I think one of the big things about that too, when you speak of that, is it's not just, we in what we're doing in this podcast, we're really talking about the impact on the general public and the impact of the people inside the four walls doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that makes it very interesting too, is that you realize that that whole experience is not just channeled into, oh, how do we sell more hamburgers, or how do we do this? It's how do we do that, and then how do we take care of the people that are making the hamburgers, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of an interesting sort of thinking that it really is. It's a street with two-way traffic. You can't
Yeah.
avoid one or the other.
Right.
So that's interesting. So, um, I tell you, that seemed like a great place to end. I'm thrilled to be doing this with you. I'm happy and honored that you asked me to help you with it, and I'm like you. I'm really excited about the conversations ahead. Think seeing new things, learning new things, meeting new people. hearing them share their stories and how that can be taken home is I think is really cool. So I'm very excited about what we have ahead of us.
That's awesome. And likewise, Carl, I'm super excited to be on this ride with you. Um, uh, you don't hear too many podcasts that have, well, maybe you do. I'm trying to think the, of the podcasts I listen to, how many of them have, two hosts versus a single host? And I guess maybe it's a mix, but for me anyway, I wouldn't want to do this completely on my own, and I can't think of anyone else that I would want to do it with. So thanks for interviewing me, and thanks to everyone for listening. We've got some great guests coming up, so be sure to follow the Intangible brand wherever you get your podcasts and smash the like button or subscribe or whatever those things are you're supposed to do. We'll get all that patter down before we get too much further along.
Okay, until next time, I'm Carl Winstead.
And I'm Jerry Gennaria, and this is the Intangible brand.